The second topic is Poka-yoke, which is about how to reduce mistakes when you serve customers. So the fact is, staff may make mistakes as they are serving customers. Let's take a look at two examples. The first example is when a 5-year-old child was flown to the wrong airport. So Maribel Martinez, the mother shown here, purchased a ticket for her 5-year-old son, Andy, to fly alone to New York City's JFK International Airport. And he was flying from the airport in Santiago, which is the capital of the Dominican Republic. When Maribel, the mother, went to the airport to pick up her son, the airline JetBlue staff presented a different boy to her. Uh-oh! And obviously she was in shock and in distress, so JetBlue staff were scrambling to figure out where was her son. After about 3 hours, they managed to find out that her son was actually in Boston. Boston is actually a great place. I spent 6 years there while I was studying for my PhD. But obviously Maribel did not intend for her son to be alone in Boston at that time. So what went wrong? So it turns out there are two boys, both in Santiago Airport, who were flying, one flying to Boston, the other flying to JFK, and for some reason, the two boys somehow swapped passports. So that boy ended up in JFK, whereas her son ended up in Boston, where the other boy was supposed to be headed. The second example of a mistake is when surgeons removed the wrong kidney. So a patient came in and his right kidney was diseased and needed to be removed. Unfortunately, the surgeons removed the other left kidney, which was healthy. And due to the patient's poor health and this surgical mistake, the patient died 5 weeks later. So what went wrong in this instance? Well, many of you may have seen x-rays, which you can take out kind of like this. And unfortunately, x-rays can be read from back to front, which basically flips left and right. And that's what happened. The surgeons did not check carefully when they viewed the x-ray, and so, because of this, removed the wrong kidney. Big oops that led to them being suspended for a year. Alright, so it's clear that mistakes can negatively affect the customer service experience. So is it possible then to not make any mistakes? Let's take a look at a Dilbert comic. Dilbert is a great source of people's real-life experiences working in the corporate world. And it's also lots of fun, so I highly encourage you to read Dilbert. I ranked all of you based on your performance, the pointy-haired boss says. Wally came out on top because he didn't make any mistakes. So this engineer in the green shirt is Wally, and our hero, or the main character, is of course Dilbert, who is wearing red today. So Dilbert points out he also didn't do any work, to which Wally says, "Why does everyone hate winners?" So the bottom line from this comic is, if you don't do any work, you won't make any mistakes. And sometimes I wonder if that's what the Hong Kong government or people there are thinking, which is why they don't do anything. But okay, hopefully I don't get into trouble for saying this. Let's move on. So let me give you students some advice. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Do speak up in class so that you can get your questions answered, so that you can learn better and earn participation marks. Learn and earn, baby. Also, don't be afraid of saying something silly and being ashamed or humiliated. All right, let's look a little bit at what happens after a mistake happens. So things that people or companies sometimes say to customers might be, beep, happens, or c'est la vie. C'est la vie is kind of a French expression that basically means the same as that's life. You just have to accept it, or there's nothing we can do about it. Another famous phrase that was made in the news recently was, "It is what it is," which of course was President Trump's response to the statement from Jonathan Swan that 1,000 Americans are dying of COVID every day. So this is a kind of a shrug response, this and all the ones in the previous slide. What companies should instead do is say sorry. Often sorry seems to be the hardest word, which is a famous song from Elton John, but kind of like 40, 50 years ago or something. And companies can also give up compensation for the inconvenience and discomfort that customers experience. So for example, recently I learned that there was a mobile game which experienced bugs and downtime that was not planned for. So because of this, they basically gave out to lots of players some free goodies that many players were excited and happy about. So how do great companies handle mistakes? Great companies realize and follow this wisdom from Benjamin Franklin that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So what this basically means is if you're able to put in a little bit of effort to prevent things from going wrong, that saves you a lot of effort that you need to put in later to make things right. There's actually a Chinese proverb which has the same meaning, 预防胜于治疗, and basically it means the same thing as what I said in the previous slide. So great companies prevent mistakes before they happen. And how they do this is by using Poka-yokes. So what are Poka-yokes? Poka-yoke wa kojo nado no seizo rai ni sechi sareru, etc., etc., etc. Alright, sorry, wrong channel, wrong language. The main point of this slide is to impress upon you that Poka-yoke is a Japanese concept that we've kind of borrowed and learned from them. So Poka-yoke is something that helps an equipment operator to avoid mistakes. Poka is the Japanese word for mistake. Yokeru is the Japanese word for avoid. And this practice is also known as mistake proofing or fail-safing. Where did Poka-yoke come from? It was formalized by Shigeo Shingo as part of the Toyota production system, the famous system that has very high quality of Toyota cars. While it was originally developed for manufacturing, similar principles can be adapted and applied to customer service. So Poka-yokes are defined as things that reduce mistakes by preventing, correcting, or drawing attention to human errors as they occur. The key point is that Poka-yokes reduce mistakes as the mistakes are occurring. If you detect mistakes that occur after the fact, you detect mistakes only when the service is kind of done and it's too late to fix the mistakes, that doesn't really count. All right, and hopefully this will be clear when we explore the examples later. So here's an example of a Poka-yoke, SIM cards and the SIM card tray. And I think this will be an example that you guys understand if you think it through. Since I know all young people basically nowadays spend lots of time with their phones and are intimately familiar with SIM cards. So let's take a careful look at the SIM card, which has a particular design, a particular corner is cut out. And notice that the SIM card tray also has the same corresponding corner filled in with some solid piece of plastic. So why is the SIM card and the SIM card tray designed in such a way? And why is this an example of a Poka-yoke? Let's have a short time to discuss. Think about this and to discuss it. Alright, so for the rest of this topic, we'll be talking about some information that was presented by Chase and Stewart in this article called Make Your Service Fail Safe, which is an article which appeared in the MIT Sloan Management Review. Don't forget, MIT is my alma mater. So, in this article, they talk about 3 types of T errors that occur when customers are being served. These 3 T errors are task, treatment, and tangible. So what are task errors? Task errors are work that is done incorrectly, work done that was not requested, work that was done in the wrong order, or work that was done too slowly. For this part, I want to clarify that when the work is done too slowly, the source of this error must be because the process was poorly designed. If work was done too slowly because the company simply does not have enough staff or enough machines to serve customers, that's not a Poka-yoke, a task error that can be solved with Poka-yokes. You just need to hire more people or set up more machines. Alright, so here are some examples of task errors. So an error might be the slice of cake is a bit too small, in which case you can use a cake slicer. So if you go to the Simply Life restaurant in Festival Walk, you can see them make cakes, and one of the things that they do is that they use a cake slicer to slice the cakes exactly so that they'll be just the right size. Another mistake might be when, this is actually something that happened to me. So when I was in Boston a few years ago, I ordered the famous New England clam chowder. And unfortunately, the waiter mixed it up and sent me a fish chowder instead. So I was halfway through my fish chowder when I thought about it and realized, why haven't I found any clams yet? And when I told the waiter about this, he apologized and gave me a new clam chowder, which was really nice because I got to eat 1.5 bowls of chowder. But of course, I felt really full at the end of my dinner. So I'm not exactly sure what went wrong, but the practice where the waiter repeats the customer's order as he or she is, after he or she has written it down, helps to reduce these errors occurring. The next error is when customers order food, for example, A, then B, then C, but perhaps the food might be prepared in the opposite or a different order, say C, then B, then A. And customers who ordered A might be surprised and unhappy if other customers who ordered later got their food first. So to address this problem, it's important for the kitchen to keep food slips of what they need to prepare arranged in first in, first out order. And this might be physical food slips, or also nowadays often restaurants run using electronic systems to tell them what to prepare next. Let's go now to treatment errors. Treatment errors are failure of staff to acknowledge the customer, listen to the customer, or react appropriately to the customer. And essentially, what this means is when staff are not polite and attentive to customers. So one example of treatment errors is when the staff at a call center don't use a smiling voice to interact with customers. So if you have trouble with something involving your credit card or your mobile phone plan, typically you call this particular number, and the staff that serve you will work in this building with lots of cubicles, and these staff basically handle calls all day. So although you can't see the staff, you can hear in their voice whether they're happy or sad or angry and annoyed. So it's quite important for these staff to try to have happy emotions and happy thoughts when they're talking to customers. So one way to help these staff remember to do this is to place a mirror in their cubicles next to the phones so that they can see if they are smiling. Another issue might be if the staff at, let's say, McDonald's don't use the correct language to interact with customers. If you have detailed training using specified in the manual of examples of what language to use, that can help to mitigate this problem. And if you're interested, you can take a bit of time to read through some of these examples of the situation and examples of what to say, what the staff should say to the customer. All right, now let's move to the last T error, which are tangible errors. And tangible means these are errors that customers can detect via the 5 senses. And these are the 5 senses: taste, hearing, sight, smell, and touch. And examples of such errors are dirty facilities, untidy uniforms, if there's too much noise, if the room is smelly, if the lighting is poor, if it's too hot or too cold. I've heard that the City U Library, for example, can be too cold, so that would be a tangible error for students, or spelling or layout mistakes for documents. And here are some examples of tangible errors and ways to prevent them. So if there are spelling or layout errors, such as this one, having a spell checker helps with spelling. Having someone to review documents and slides helps to reduce layout errors. Another tangible error is if staff are wearing dirty uniforms, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. So here's a staff member who's wearing a pretty dirty uniform. And let's say the managers discuss this problem and propose 2 different solutions. The first solution is to place a mirror at the exit door of the staff changing room, so that the staff will see the mirror and see themselves before they exit the changing room and interact with customers. The second possible solution is to stockpile extra sets of clean uniforms in the staff changing room. So are these solutions Poka-yokes? Why or why not? Let's spend a bit of time to think about this and to discuss. All right, so this is the end of the topic. What are the key takeaways? So it's clear that mistakes can ruin the customer service experience. So this means companies who want to deliver great service need to use Poka-yokes or mistake proofing to reduce mistakes. We also talked about the 3 types of T errors that you should be familiar with. And you should also understand both the definition of Poka-yokes and know how to determine if your practice is a Poka-yoke that helps to detect and prevent errors while they're occurring and not when it's too late to fix the problem. All right, that's all for this topic.